to the Conscious Café. So these are really getting insight and wisdom about the future of work. And today I'm so excited to talk about the future of arts and entertainment in all aspects of it, and certainly in film. So the last couple months, let's start there. What are the differences that you've noticed, and what are the adjustments that the film industry specifically have had to make over this period of time? Because we're all missing it. So, what is it from your end?
For me personally, I still feel like I'm just living in my little apartment all the time, and having the same kinds of meetings and interaction with people. So it's really interesting to be doing something like this now, because I think it would be quite different, of course, reflecting when you're more actively engaging with people. I almost feel like a little less socially capable now, like we've lost some of those skills over time while we're in quarantine. But yeah, I mean, to me, I think some of the most striking things I'm sure most people have seen in the news, I mean, obviously there's major job loss, a lot of Hollywood or freelance workers that are struggling to, survive here. Even of the people who may be executives, probably a third of those people have lost their jobs. And then you're looking at everything from Mulan, which I'm sure everyone heard about, different strategies for distribution, and pivots, and Tenet, which was a huge, I guess I wouldn't say it's a huge disappointment, but I think for them, certainly it was a big change in, what they expected for their distribution models, and still trying to experiment with theaters, but where we have just, major theater loss. I think the exhibition side of this business is getting hit very hard right now. And you can see sort of a map of the US, and I think there's only one state, Montana, I think, where they're actually operating with like 70% or more, capability or to have people come into to theaters. So, I think the theatrical side of this business was definitely already changing over time, but I think that process has been sped up quite quickly. And then, I'm really, right now, I've moved from AFI to be working at Sundance, where I design and produce online courses. And so I did that right before this pandemic, which, I've had many people say seemed to have been a good move. So I was already sort of working on Zoom. I was already working in this space where I'm working what I thought was really exciting, this idea of this global community. In large part, I sort of realized this through Quantic. And so that has been really eye-opening, because I think a lot of things have changed. I've talked to a few instructors who, teach at NYU, and previously it was like they could attend one event or teach one class for one institution at a time. And now it's like they're attending an event across the world one day, and something in New York, potentially even live, and then another thing in a different state. And so I think that's just a really exciting part of this, right? That we're able to globally connect more. Everyone's been forced to figure out how to do that, and all at the same time. So I think there's, these real upsides from it as well.
Yeah. And I didn't even really think of that, but because that world flattening and being able to inspire and collaborate and get instruction from different people from all the world, it'll be interesting to see the reciprocal benefits when the world does open up a little bit more and we do get back into some of the practices, what that will look like. Have you heard of any innovative or captive ideas on how people are still engaging with, whether it's traditional theater, film theater, anything like that? Like, is there more drive-ins? Like, have you heard of any ideas that
it's so fun? A friend of mine had made a movie about like the drive-in movie theaters, and a documentary, and how sad it was. They'd all closed, and she'd sort of captured this whole thing. And then it's been this crazy renaissance. I mean, I know in California, certainly there's a ton of drive-in theaters, and that's how people are going to theaters. A lot of film festivals have adapted to have this drive-in component. And also I give the film festivals a ton of credit for sort of adapting very quickly to find digital solutions. And I've only participated in one festival so far that way, but it's been quite, I mean, you really lose that sort of word of mouth, that like buzz, that's of course human connection. But for some people who like things from the comfort of their home, we've seen that side of this business really flourish. In the theater side, I'm less, involved in theater, but I did see a production with the Geffen Theater, and I think, of course, the production has to lend itself to this type of thing. But I did something on Zoom where there were 25 people who sort of participated live in, the Brady Bunch gallery setting. And then there were 6,000 people streaming in from around the world. And it was essentially a story that was about quarantine, and in between it was sort of an interactive magic show. So I think that people are finding ways to adapt. I mean, of course, I think artists, Hollywood certainly, are filled with creative and resourceful people who are used to making sort of almost military-like plans to accomplish something. So I think that this group of people will find ways to both express themselves, to help other people through these times, no matter how dark it is, and adapt. I think that's sort of what I'm seeing, at least.
And the other thing is, while we all knew and could give lip service to arts and entertainment being this like foundation to culture, and now interacting with it, I would say for myself, I interact with it more now during this period of time and have more of an appreciation for the arts because of how much it's helped get through these times and like times of uncertainty, to pull yourself away and to be in a different fictional world or to be entertained with something like a documentary. So I'm really wondering how it's going to change and evolve the way we digest this content and how we do it. But I don't know if you have any stats on this. I didn't ask you this beforehand, but for me, my comedy watching has skyrocketed. My drama watching has plummeted. Is there any stats around that? Do you know if this is just an anecdotal response or if it is something?
I'm sure there are stats on it. I mean, if you just looked at sort of the lineups probably for the networks, that kind of thing, I'm sure it would reflect what you're saying, because I think everyone I've spoken to has felt the same. It's like, let's watch Schitt's Creek. I don't want to watch any more apocalyptic dystopian stories. We're living through that right now, and I think people are looking for more of an escape. They're having existential conversations every day. So I think people just don't need that in their entertainment right now, for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there's still people looking for that. I don't have any statistics though to pull from. I can look for something and send a follow-up.
No, I'm just wondering, if it was, because it's something we noticed in our own home, is that we're seeking out comedies. So in the chat, if anybody has any recommendations, let us know. So in saying that, that's been the last year or so, or whatever, 8 months, whatever it is now. Beyond that, the last couple of years, there's been a large amount of movement and change that has certainly been reflected in film and entertainment. Can you speak about the evolution that you've seen in the industry? I'm thinking everything from the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, representation of the LGBTQ community. Can you speak to that at all?
So I used to lead this directing workshop for women at AFI, which was the American Film Institute, which was sort of a program that was launched in 1974 because there were so few women directing. So I spent a lot of time really like banging my head against the wall, trying to figure out how to make a difference. And so this issue for all people really has been really important to me. It's a big reason why I wanted to be at Sundance too, and in this online space, because you're able to reach underrepresented communities and places to really help help people improve their like access to education and community. And so I've seen, of course, Me Too had a huge impact, and it was just sort of obviously time for this industry and the world to deal with some issues that were way overdue. But I will say, I think many people still feel like many of these issues are not totally been dealt with. There's a very top level. I mean, everything just from just general bullying and harassment and kind of like hazing in the industry to obviously some of these more awful crimes. But, I think at least that tip of the iceberg has been broken from on the Me Too side. And I think it continues to be examined and fought back on. I mean, I think the summer with the Black Lives Matter movement making, I think, a very meaningful dent. I'm still like optimistic, though occasionally cynical. So I want everyone to leave feeling optimistic. But I do feel like immediately there was a lot of action. I hope that some of that action can be sustained. I think we've seen a lot of companies making serious commitments to benchmarks where in hiring on their writing staffs for television, or commitments to certain things, or financing and funding. Macro is a company that I think is probably leading the way just for people of color, and that's been very exciting. I think where it's been sort of tough when you have a major economic downturn is, where people who might have been flourishing previously would have had money to sort of support certain programs or nonprofits. Those sort of things might be challenged during this time. I think more and more people's eyes have been opened. There's more and more willingness to speak up to power, I think, in a certain way. More companies are certainly evaluating their own internal practices. There's more sort of watchdogging of those companies across the board. So, I do think certain things, like I've seen shadowing opportunities where, people might, to go up that pipeline to be a TV director, they would potentially shadow another director. And like those kinds of things aren't happening, both because of COVID and because of sort of limited opportunities to potentially invest in that right now. And so that seems like a bit of a shame, but at the same time, we've seen these other areas of growth. So, I think I've just seen over time, it just is slower than we want it to be, but it does seem like change is happening. And I'm certainly inspired by that. I've seen it across many places and many organizations. There's more of a commitment than ever. So that's great.
Let's hope that it's all going to still move in the same direction and adjust over time. What about representation on the public facing part of it? The actors, the plot lines, who's the central character? Are we going to see a shift in that? Have we already seen a little bit of a shift in that? What comes to mind is Reese Witherspoon and what she's doing and how much she's advocating towards these phenomenal shows with strong female leads, and definitely a diversity that she brings in that way. But that's coming from a very lay perspective. So are you seeing things like that are kind of coming together?
Yeah, I think there's been sort of a big shift in conversation around authorship and sort of like whose power do we build, right? So like whose stories are we helping tell? And are they the right person to be telling that story? Even I was reading sort of recently about Glow, which had been canceled on Netflix, but which had been praised for its sort of diversity and these women, this cast of women. And then there was a little bit of a backlash for the people of color on the show, those characters. So, you might have a situation where they're the best of intentions and there's a group of people, but it might take someone speaking up to make sure those stories of those people on the show are getting told properly and have a group of writers who represent those arenas. So I think that conversation is happening more and more. And, like I said, that cast was willing to sort of speak up. And that I felt like wasn't the environment of the culture a few years ago. So I think that's very exciting. And we're sort of starting to see each of those writers' rooms, especially in television, because television is having such a great time right now, be more reflective of the world that we see every day. And so that's a big shift. I think the problem still lies on the sort of executive ranks where we're just not yet seeing as much diversity. And so, I think that might just take some more time to build. I do think that there are initiatives, in various places. But
something that's really fascinating is how much entertainment feeds into a lot of what we believe and how we believe society is and what norms are created. So there's a lot of power in the pen and of these writers that are creating these stories and these plot lines. And what I'm really hopeful is that having cultures where people can now call people out and hold them accountable to what they're doing will reflect in some sort of change. We'll see how long it takes, but going forward. So I'm just trying to put a little hope on the whole conversation, because I know there's so much work to be done and going forward. From your perspective, so producing and teaching, are there things that or systems being put in place? You talked about the shadowing of director, for example. Are there other things that come to mind to try to leverage this change and to really make sure that it happens?
Yeah, I know certainly internally at Sundance, there's a lot of efforts being made for the organization. I mean, I think for what's exciting about sort of, just digital tools, increasing the internet, capability, improving more people having smartphones, all of these things every year, are I just reading a little bit more about an organization called Impact, which was started by Ron Howard and Brian Grazer. And it's just like, Sundance Collabority has our giant global community, but it's like another opportunity where they're trying to level the playing field, right? So they're trying to connect people all over the world. They can be a source of screenplays. They have a pipeline to Netflix, so Netflix can find more, diversity of writers and underrepresented stories for their global community. So I think there's a lot more opportunities like that where you're finding sort of the technology is helping with solutions. I'm not sure any other specific tools as much as it just seems like people are being held to take action.
Right.
And so I think that seems to be, to me, like one of the big wins for 2020.
We'll call it a win.
We'll call it a win.
I love that. Obviously, the industry is evolving. We've barely touched the surface of all the different ways that it is. So if somebody's coming up now, what are the different skills that people should be developing for the future of the industry?
Yeah, I certainly have always thought you just need to be adaptable as a person as time changes and things change. But and I've always been kind of a lifelong learner. Like I wanted to do this quantic program, even though it's not exactly in an area that I'm in right now.
Beautiful plug for that.
So I always think like it's great to keep learning and growing and connecting and sort of keeping your brain moving. But I also think like in this business, it seems like there are more and more multi-hyphenates. I would just say like that people kind of just opening their minds that they can do multiple things, or sort of keeping that idea open, that it's useful perhaps to get work made or seen to be able to do that. And I'm not sure what else. I mean, I think certainly like data has become a different beast now than it maybe was before. I had a couple instructors who were having students look at Google Trends and sort of use these different tools as a way to sort of think about their audience and their market and how to sort of, potentially pivot their stories, or how to market their stories. I think obviously, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about AI and all of that. But I think all those things will change this business a little bit. But I'm not sure, like if you were going in to be a screenwriter or a director, that there's much more other than like focusing on the craft and understanding how the business works that I would recommend. But I do think just a sense of sort of like, adaptability and resourcefulness is just always going to be critical,
Yeah, and just thinking of that, I guess wearing the research hat that I have too, the ability to do research and get more details on what you want to write about is certainly at your fingertips now, and constantly advancing in that way. But then, yeah, there's certainly that. So Netflix having such a predominant role in this area and having algorithms that are showing people what they're more likely to see is good and bad, right? Because then it kind of limits your exposure to what you might be seeing otherwise. So there's certainly good, bad, and otherwise with the technology and the way that things are shifting and how we're using it to do different things. And I imagine the technology is really impacting the documentary world. And again, in regards to getting access to the people they need to access, or to the information, just flattening the world, I guess, a little bit more when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I think there's been some exciting changes. I mean, to me, documentary has been really exciting in the last few years, and doc series, I've gotten sucked into The Vow on HBO. So, I think it is, but it's not in the comedic vein that you're looking for.
No.
So maybe stay away. But yeah, there's just so many great doc series. I mean, I think, of course, with COVID, I think you'll see certain things kind of flourishing more than others, like audio storytelling, or maybe even documentary or animation, just because of the circumstances.
I would love to open it to any questions people have for Patty on the future of art and entertainment.
I just watched Totally Under Control last night, which is Alex Gibney's new doc. I love him. I'm thinking of Icarus. That was a great documentary. There's so many. Oh, I loved Free Solo. I mean, did anyone see Free Solo? Oh my gosh. So many great films. I mean, stories, of course I love storytelling and the power and our ability to live different lives through it. So this is like totally up my alley. I don't think it's probably really reflecting people properly. I know there have been a couple examples that have been great. I think Crip Camp is a documentary that's supposed to be fantastic. Have not seen it yet, though. I know Special was sort of a great show, but I personally think that that the more you can cast people coming from the community, the better. I think we're always balancing sort of the idea of getting performances you need to make it really work, and also casting from the community. I think that's a really important conversation to have. So I think things like the Blacklist and resources like obviously Sundance Collab or Impact, that organization I was mentioning before, I think those are all great ways to like reach other people outside of the regular Hollywood system. But I think there's been a huge push to get people to work to find those, that the people staffing these television shows or the studios looking for writers or whatever, really dig deeper to have better lists. I know, for managers and agents going to all these sort of like pitch fests or those kinds of events now, they're really looking for underrepresented people, which is great. I mean, that's a really exciting thing. I don't know, where sort of differently abled people are going to fall into that, when there's been such a big push for the sort of Black and Indigenous population specifically right now. I hope that that all of these communities are encompassed, and we have a better effort towards equity across the board. Unfortunately, the pipeline kind of gets jammed up in these specific arenas, which are sort of like either these executives or the agents and managers or the even the critics, right? Like the critics are kind of coming with their own lens, and that's going to have an impact on everything. So, we're trying to make sure that all those things are sort of constantly being pushed. What I understand is definitely sort of the Netflix thing, right? So there's this crazy opportunity for curation and sort of a personalized experience that's coming about. I understand that Warner Brothers might be using AI with their budgeting programs for their film budgets and sort of analyzing their data. I know there's, like this potential for some things that I think could be quite a shame, where we might be like losing some artistry, both like marketing and advertising, where there's just this capability to kind of design something that meets this need really quickly, or like a movie trailer, that there's sort of this ability to do that quickly, more quickly than a human would, and efficiently. I mean, I'm nervous that it could be something as big as like an editor, that all of a sudden it'd be like, oh, we just do shot, reverse shot, and we cut this thing together, and then you end up with this really, sad Netflix art, and that's kind of my fear, I guess. But I think there's a lot of things that might just become useful tools potentially, as far as an understanding market and how that could help you better reach your audience. And as an audience member, like we said, there's a little bit of a danger to this. It's a double-edged sword, but that potentially someone's helping you curate. I mean, I think, how do you, really build community virtually is probably the question I think about the most. So I think we spend a lot of time thinking about it. We're doing like 8-week courses. So when people are matched, it's for a much shorter period of time. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that and how we can try to, use the tools that we have efficiently and across time zones to bring people together. But I think sometimes it's like the simple things that sort of work for that. I mean, what I love about it is exactly what I loved about Quantic, which is just sort of this flexibility, the affordability, this global community, the ability to really reach people that maybe wouldn't reach otherwise. My vision is sort of probably to bring that to my own work outside of Sundance, create my own community of artists and to continue to create my own films, I think. I mean, what I really love about what we're trying to do there with Collab is just build a pipeline for artists from like their emerging stage through sustaining artists, and really just continue to have that community and that support for your life. Because really, I think that's the reality of it. It's not like a one-year program. Like, you really need the support of several years over many challenges and changes in the industry to kind of survive as an artist. So, and that community is so valuable.
Thank you so much, Patty.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Great to meet you all. Hope to see you again soon.
I want to watch a comedy. Bye.